The alarm klaxons aboard the UESN Titan blared as the massive dreadnought's tactical displays lit up with incoming contacts. Captain Elias Vance straightened his uniform jacket, the fresh plasma burns along the ship's hull, still radiating heat through the bulkheads. He'd brought the Titan home from the Cygnus campaign barely operational, and now this. "Report," Vance ordered, his voice cutting through the bridge's tension. Lieutenant Cho didn't look up from her console. 37 signatures entering high orbit, sir. Configuration matches Galactic Empire tax enforcement vessels. Vance's jaw tightened. The Titan's bridge crew exchanged glances. Ensign Petrovsky, fresh from the academy, actually snorted before catching himself. "Open channel," Vance said, adjusting his collar. The main viewer flickered to life, revealing a towering Zorathian in shimmering silver bureaucratic robes that seemed to shift colors with every movement. High Assessor Vex'lix's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, his elongated face twisted in the smug satisfaction, unique to mid-level functionaries given sudden authority. "Human vessel," Vex'lix intoned, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are in violation of Galactic Statute Fe B, subsection Fe, regarding unauthorized atmospheric consumption." Vance leaned forward. "Run that by me again." Vex'lix's mandibles twitched in irritation. Behind him, a dozen similarly robed Zorathians busied themselves with glowing data tablets. "Your species has been emitting uncontrolled CO into galactic space for centuries. The Empire has determined this constitutes theft of communal resources." On the Titan's bridge, Commander Holt choked on his coffee. "They're taxing us for breathing." Vex'lix's hologram flickered as he produced a scroll that unfurled halfway across the bridge. "The assessment is quite clear. Earth owes 7 trillion galactic standard units in back taxes, plus interest, for unauthorized carbon emissions dating back to your industrial revolution." Vance rubbed his temples. The Titan's crew had just survived 3 months of constant combat against the Vorak raiders. They'd lost good people, and now this. "Let me understand," Vance said slowly. "You're saying that every breath every human has taken for 200 years is taxable?" "Correct," Vex'lix said, his uppermost eyes narrowing. "Payment is due immediately. Should you refuse, the Empire will be forced to repossess your atmosphere." Petrovsky muttered something in Russian that made Chief Engineer O'Malley cross herself. Vance stood, his chair sliding back with a hiss. "Assessor, with all due respect, that is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard." Vex'lix's skin darkened to an angry violet. "This is no laughing matter. Human, the Empire does not make idle threats." On the tactical display, the tax fleet's weapons ports began glowing a soft blue as they powered up. Vance glanced at Holt, who gave a barely perceptible nod. The Titan's point defense systems were already online, their targeting arrays locking onto the pristine silver vessels hovering over Earth's blue-green atmosphere. "Here is what is going to happen," Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You're going to take your tax notice, fold it until it is all sharp corners, and shove it where your species equivalent of the sun doesn't shine." Vex'lix's mandibles quivered. "You dare, I dare," Vance interrupted. "Because last I checked, Earth's atmosphere belongs to Earth. And if you think for 1 second we're going to pay for the privilege of existing, you've severely misjudged who you're dealing with." The channel crackled as Vex'lix's image distorted with rage. "You primitive apes, the Empire will save it," Vance said, cutting the transmission with a gesture. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the Titan's reactors powering up weapons systems. Holt exhaled slowly. "They can't be serious." "Oh, they're serious," Vance said, watching the tax fleet begin its deployment. "Which means we need to get serious too. Alert Earth Defense Command, and someone get me the president." As the crew sprang into action, Ensign Petrovsky shook his head, taxing breathing. "What is next? Charging us for sunlight?" Vance didn't smile. "Don't give them ideas." Outside the viewports, the first of the tax enforcement vessels began moving into blockade positions, their polished hulls gleaming like fresh coins against the blackness of space. The Titan's weapons systems hummed to full readiness, the ship's battle scars a stark contrast to the unmarked Imperial ships. "Captain," Lieutenant Cho said suddenly, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Mars." Vance nodded. "Put it through." The screen resolved into the harried face of Dr. Rachel Wu, her lab coat smudged with soot. "Captain, we've got Superior auditors swarming our biodomes. They're attaching cow meters to everything that vents air. They're saying—" "We know what they're saying," Vance interrupted. "Hold position, Doctor, help is coming." As the connection cut, Holt leaned in. "This is coordinated. They're hitting us everywhere at once." Vance's fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair. "Then we respond everywhere at once. Helm, plot an intercept course for the lead tax vessel. Tactical, warm up the MP cannons. And someone get me a secure line to Admiral Chen at Jupiter Command." The Titan's engines roared to life as the massive dreadnought turned its scarred prow toward the gleaming Imperial ships. On the surface below, 8 billion humans kept breathing, unaware that their very existence had just been declared taxable income. Vance allowed himself one last look at Earth through the viewport before turning to his crew. "Let's show these bureaucrats what happens when you try to bill humanity for being alive." The Galactic Senate chamber hummed with the low-frequency chatter of 100 species, its domed ceiling refracting starlight through crystalline panels. Floating platforms arranged in concentric rings gave higher elevation to the more important delegates, their shadows stretching long over the human delegation's isolated platform at the chamber's base. Lieutenant Mara Cole adjusted the collar of her dress uniform, the stiff fabric chafing against her neck. Around her, the other human diplomats shifted uncomfortably as holographic displays flickered to life above them, projecting exaggerated comparisons of lung capacity and respiratory efficiency. Ambassador Krell of the Vorak Dominion unfurled his segmented limbs from his elevated perch, his 4 eyes blinking in alternating patterns of amusement. His carapace gleamed under the chamber lights, polished to intimidate. "The data speaks for itself," Krell announced, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. A hologram zoomed in on a human lung beside a gruel methane. Processor organ, the comparison laughably skewed. "Your species consumes oxygen like a leaking starship consumes fuel, inefficient, wasteful." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. A Zenth delegate pulsed bioluminescent patterns across its gelatinous form, their version of laughter. Mara's fingers twitched toward the sidearm. She wasn't permitted to carry in the chamber. "These are doctored metrics," Human Ambassador Cho protested, his voice strained. "You're comparing baseline human respiration to specialized—" "Silence," Krell interrupted, mandibles clicking. "The Federation has tolerated your biological indiscretions long enough. Your planet's CO emissions have reached taxable levels. Pay the breathing levy or face sanctions." Mara watched as the Gruul ambassador raised a spindly limb, its methane-filled sacs vibrating with barely contained mirth. "Perhaps the humans should be charged extra." It wheezed. "Their lungs are so weak, they need twice the atmospheric density of civilized species." Laughter, actual laughter, in a dozen different forms, echoed through the chamber. The sound set Mara's teeth on edge. She'd heard that same laughter during the first contact wars, right before human ships proved warp cannons could fire through Vorak shield matrices. A holographic counter appeared above the human delegation, displaying an astronomical sum scrolling upward in real time. "This is absurd," Cho hissed. "You can't tax a biological function." Krell's antennae twitched. "We can, we have. The first payment is due in 30 cycles." He leaned forward, his carapace creaking. "Unless, of course, humanity wishes to demonstrate how long it can refrain from breathing." Mara's chair screeched as she stood. The chamber's acoustics carried her voice perfectly. "You want to see human lung capacity?" She didn't wait for permission, climbing onto the platform's railing. The move was reckless, undiplomatic, exactly what the situation called for. Gasps rippled through the assembly as Mara inhaled sharply, then held her breath, The holographic displays flickered, recalibrating to track her vitals. 30 seconds passed. Then 60 Krell's mandibles stopped clicking. At 90 seconds, the Zenth delegate's bioluminescence dimmed in confusion. By 2 minutes, the chamber had gone utterly silent. Mara's vision spotted at the edges, but she kept her stance rigid. On Mars, she'd trained for vacuum exposure. This was nothing. The counter above her head froze at Fei, then flashed red, the system's limit for oxygen deprivation tolerance. Mara finally exhaled, her breath hissing through clenched teeth. "You were saying about inefficiency?" Krell's carapace darkened. A Vorak sign of agitation. "Parlor tricks. Your primitive biology still—" "Lieutenant Cole," interrupted a new voice. The central hologram shimmered, resolving into the scarred face of Admiral Graves, aboard the USN Retribution. "Our deep range scanners just picked up something interesting." The hologram shifted, displaying a tactical overlay of the Sol system. Dozens of new contacts blinked to life along the system's edge, human ships, all running dark until this moment. Graves' smile was all teeth. "Turns out the Federation isn't the only one who can issue invoices." Krell's platform dipped slightly, his weight shifting uneasily. "This is a Senate chamber, not a military." "Here is the thing about breathing," Mara interrupted, tapping her wrist display. The holograms changed again, now showing atmospheric readouts from a dozen Vorak colony worlds. "We've been studying your systems too. Funny how your people can't tolerate oxygen concentrations above 19%. The chamber's lighting flickered, not a malfunction, but a signal. Somewhere beyond the ornate walls, Earth's defense grid was powering up. Krell's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. "You wouldn't dare." Mara smiled. "Try us." A tremor ran through the Senate floor as distant engines flared to life. The human fleet wasn't just visible now. It was moving. Ambassador Cho rose slowly, straightening his jacket. "The bill for today's mockery will be delivered shortly." He glanced at the still frozen respiratory counter. "I suggest your bookkeepers take a deep breath before opening it." Outside the chamber's massive viewports, the first human warships pierced the upper atmosphere, their engines burning like vengeful stars. The Martian airlock hissed open, revealing Overseer Zix's angular silhouette against the crimson sky. His carapace gleamed under the artificial sun, the gold sigils of the Galactic Tax Authority pulsing with self-importance. Behind him, a swarm of audit drones buzzed like metallic locusts, their needle, thin probes already scanning the biodome's atmospheric readouts. Dr. Rachel Wu didn't bother standing. She kept her boots propped on the console, fingers tapping the armrest of her chair. The other scientists had frozen when the Zarathian ships descended. But Rachel had seen worse. Shed survived the Europa uprising. A tax collector didn't scare her. "By decree of Emperor Sulta," Zix announced, his voice a grating synthetic translation. "All carbon dioxide emissions within Federation territory are subject to immediate taxation." One of his clawed appendages unfolded a holographic scroll, its glowing text listing penalties in excruciating detail. "Your station's respiration quota has been exceeded by Fei teratons this cycle. Penalty, Fei billion credits or immediate atmospheric lockdown." A junior researcher dropped a beaker. The glass shattered, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. Rachel finally turned her head, eyeing Zix with the same detached interest Shed give a malfunctioning rover. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You're charging us for breathing." Zix's mandibles twitched. "Your species exhales, at a rate Fei higher than Gruul efficiency standards. A wasteful biological flaw. The Empire merely seeks to incentivize improvement." One of the drones detached from the swarm, attaching itself to a ventilation shaft with a magnetic clank. Its display flickered. CO output. Fei above taxable threshold. Rachel snorted. "That's your play. You wait until we've got 6 domes full of seedlings about to break atmosphere, then choke us out over a rounding error." She swung her legs down and stood, rolling her shoulders. "Fine, you want our air." Her palm slapped the emergency override. Alarms blared as the biodome's safeties disengaged. The terraforming tanks, massive vats of compressed oxygen, meant for Phase 2 of Mars colonization, roared to life. Vents exploded open, and a hurricane of Purel blasted into the chamber. Zix staggered back, his exoskeleton creaking under the sudden pressure shift. Cease. The first drone popped like a firecracker, its circuits frying in the hyper-oxygenated environment, then another, then a dozen more, a chain reaction of sparks and shrapnel. Rachel grabbed a breather mask from the wall, securing it over her face as the oxygen levels climbed into the red. "See, we did pay our taxes," she said, voice muffled but clear. "All those years funding Earth's R&D, all those patents your empire pirated." She stepped forward, kicking aside a smoldering drone. "Turns out oxygen's flammable as hell when you pump it to Phe concentration." Zix's compound eyes darted to the remaining drones, half of them sparking, the others frantically recalculating. His translation unit glitched, spitting out static. "You tell your emperor something for me," Rachel said, leaning in. The air was so thick now, the static from dying drones hung in visible arcs. "Human lungs, they're not inefficient." She tapped her mask. "They're overclocked." Outside, the crimson sky darkened further, not from dust storms, but from the angular shadows of the UESN Retribution and her sister ships dropping out of warp. Their engines glowed like vengeful stars. Zix's carapace finally cracked with an audible snap, a fissure running down his thorax from the pressure. He collapsed just as the first orbital bombardment shook the planet. Rachel didn't flinch. She just watched the fireworks through the reinforced glass, oxygen still roaring into the chamber. "Add that to our tab," she muttered. The void near Jupiter hung heavy with tension, the gas giant swirling storms casting eerie shadows across the UESN Retribution's armored hull. Commander Derek Holt stood on the bridge, his fingers tracing the edge of the tactical display. The Zerathian armada had arrived, hundreds of sleek silver warships gliding into position, their ion cannons pulsing with ominous energy. "Status report," Holt barked, his voice steady despite the knot in his gut. Lieutenant Chen adjusted his headset. "I've locked onto Earth's orbital grid, sir. Admiral Tholkor's flagship is hailing us." Holt exhaled slowly. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the towering form of Admiral Tholkor. His chitinous faceplates gleamed under the bridge lights, 4 cold eyes fixed on Holt. "Commander," the Zerathian hissed, his voice like grinding metal, "your species has one final chance to comply. Pay the atmospheric levy, or face annihilation." Holt leaned forward, his knuckles whitening against the console. "Let me get this straight. You're threatening to suffocate an entire planet because we won't pay for the air we breathe." Tholkor's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. "The Galactic Empire does not tolerate freeloaders. Your all emissions are a resource, human one you have stolen for millennia." Behind Holt, Ensign Reyes muttered under her breath, "Freeloaders, we terraformed half this system with our tech." Holt didn't turn. His gaze never left Tholkor. "You want payment, Admiral. Fine. Well pay." He tapped a command into his console. Just not in credits. The Retribution's weapons array hummed to life, but not with the standard missile lock. Instead, a series of modified warheads slid into launch tubes, bulky, unassuming things, their casings marked with the jagged lightning bolt of EMP designation. Tholkor's eyes narrowed. "You cannot hope to match our firepower," Holt smirked. "Who said anything about matching it?" He turned to Chen. "Fire." The Retribution shuddered as the warheads launched, streaking toward the Zerathian formation. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the warheads detonated, not in fiery explosions, but in silent, cascading waves of blue lightning. The effect was instantaneous. Zerathian ships flickered like dying stars, their shields collapsing as the EMP surge ripped through their systems. Engines sputtered, weapons went dark across the fleet. Vessels listed helplessly, their crews scrambling to restore power. On the bridge, Reyes let out a whoop. Direct hit. Their entire front line is dead in the water. Holt watched as the Retribution scanners lit up with drifting ships. They never shielded against MPs, he mused. Too busy polishing their tax codes to bother with actual warfare. Chen frowned. Sir, they're not done. Tholkor's flagship is still operational, and Hez pissed. Sure enough, the massive Zarathian dreadnought was powering up its primary cannon, a monstrous barrel glowing crimson as it charged. Holt's smile didn't waver. Bring us about, full thrusters. The Retribution lurched forward, weaving through the disabled fleet, like a shark through shallow water. Alarms blared as the Zarathian flagship's targeting systems locked on. They're gonna fire, Reyes shouted. Holt gripped his chair. Not if we fire first. He punched a new sequence into the console. Activate the gift we got from Mars. Deep in the Retribution's belly, a secondary array powered up, a jury-rigged monstrosity of human ingenuity. Reverse-engineered from the Zephyrian drones Rachel Wu had overloaded. The system hummed, then unleashed a concentrated burst of pure oxygen, funneled into a magnetic containment field, and fired like a projectile. The oxygen packet struck the Zarathian flagship's cannon just as it fired. The resulting explosion lit up Jupiter's sky. The flagship's own plasma burst ignited the oxygen in a cataclysmic chain reaction, tearing through the ship's hull in a fireball, so bright it momentarily outshone the gas giant itself. Debris rained across the battlefield, scattering the remaining Zarathian vessels like frightened birds. Silence settled over the Retribution's bridge. Chen was the first to speak. Did we just burn them with air? Holt leaned back, folding his arms. Told you we'd pay. Outside, the remnants of the tax fleet scrambled to retreat, their pristine silver hulls scorched and broken. Holt watched them go, then keyed the comms to Earth Command. Tell the Senate we've delivered our first installment. The rest of the bill's coming soon. Reyes grinned. What's next, sir? Taxing sunlight? Holt's expression darkened. Oh, they'll try. He turned to the helm. Set course for Luna. We've got a war to finish. The Retribution banked hard, its engines flaring as it left the wreckage behind. Jupiter's storms churned below, indifferent to the battle, and the message it had just sent to the galaxy. Humanity didn't pay taxes, it collected them. The lunar dust swirled in slow motion as Sergeant Jax Rivera adjusted the straps of his reinforced exosuit. Around him, the rest of Alpha Squad hunkered down in the makeshift trenches. Their breathing loud in the suit is comms. The regolith underfoot vibrated with distant impacts, orbital bombardment from the Zarathian fleet, still pounding the moon's surface from high above. 30 seconds till drop pod impact. Corporal Chen's voice crackled over the squad channel. Sensors show Vorak signatures. Lots of them. Rivera checked his rifle's charge. The new plasma mods glowed blue along the barrel. Remember the briefing, boys. These lizard brains think we're weak because we need air. Let's remind them what happens when humans get backed into a corner. A chorus of grim chuckles answered him. Then the sky split open. Streaks of fire punched through the thin lunar atmosphere as Vorak drop pods screamed toward their position. The pods hit like meteors, kicking up plumes of grey dust that hung suspended in the low gravity. Rivera's HUD flashed warnings as biosignatures emerged, hulking Vorak shock troops in their signature black carapace armor, their forearms each wielding different weapons. The lead Vorak, marked as Warlord Grix by Rivera's targeting system, stepped forward. His voice boomed through external speakers, translated by the suit, is AI. No air here, humans, just death. The alien's slit pupilled eyes gleamed behind his transparent faceplate. Your lungs will empty and we will... Rivera fired. The plasma round took Grix square in the chest, knocking the warlord back 2 steps. The Vorak looked down at the smoking crater in his armor, then up at Rivera with something like amusement. You think that tickles? Wasn't aiming for you, Rivera said. The explosion lit up the lunar plain as Rivera's shot detonated the hidden minefield Alpha Squad had planted hours earlier. Vorak troops flew like ragdolls, their armor punctured by shrapnel. Grix barely flinched as debris pinged off his reinforced plating. Clever, the warlord admitted. But clever doesn't breathe for you. He raised a clawed hand, and the remaining Vorak activated their secret weapon. Atmospheric disruptors mounted on their backs began humming, sucking what little oxygen existed in the lunar soil into filtration units. Rivera's suit alarms blared, oxygen levels dropping. Chen shouted. They're vacuuming the area. Inside his helmet, Rivera grinned. Initiate recycle protocol. All across the human line. Soldiers reached up and activated their scavenged respirators. Modified Vorak tech reverse. Engineered during the first skirmishes. The masks flared to life, but instead of filtering air for humans, they did the opposite. Grix's smug expression faltered as his own troops began staggering. Vorak warriors clutched at their throats, their sophisticated lung systems seizing up as the hacked respirators flooded the local atmosphere with pure nitrogen. What is this? Grex rasped, his voice strangled. Rivera stepped forward, his boots crunching on frozen regolith. Funny thing about your fancy breathers, he said, watching the warlord collapse to his knees. Turns out they work both ways. He leaned down, putting his helmet faceplate inches from Grix's twitching features. You need us to breathe now. The Vorak warlord's eyes rolled back as his body convulsed. Around him, his elite shock troops lay motionless, their armored forms still clutching weapons. They'd never fire again. Alpha Squad moved through the battlefield, checking fallen enemies. Private Kowalski whistled. Damn, Sarge. They really didn't see that coming. Rivera ejected the spent plasma cartridge from his rifle. Nobody ever does. He looked up at the stars, where the flashes of distant naval battles still flickered. Let's move out. The Admiral's going to want to hear about this. As they marched toward the rally point, Chen glanced back at the field of fallen Vorak. Think the Empire will get the message? Rivera didn't answer. The moon's silent surface stretched endlessly before them, a graveyard of alien arrogance. Some lessons had to be taught more than once. The UESN Titan shuddered as another volley of plasma fire scorched its already battered hull. Warning klaxons wailed through the corridors, their shrill cries drowned out only by the deeper groan of straining metal. Captain Elias Vance gripped the command console, his knuckles white. The bridge crew worked in frantic silence, their faces illuminated by the flashing red emergency lights and the holographic displays showing the carnage outside. Earth's stratosphere burned with the wreckage of both human and Zarathian ships. The Galactic Empire's blockade had turned into a slaughterhouse, but not the one they had expected. The Titan, though bleeding atmosphere and trailing debris, still held position between the invaders and the planet below. Captain, Lieutenant Cho called from the tactical station, his voice tight. Emperor Salta's flagship is locking its primary batteries on us. They're charging for a full broadside. Vance didn't flinch. He had known this was coming. The Titan was the last major human warship still operational in high orbit. The rest of the fleet had either been destroyed or forced to retreat. But retreat wasn't an option, not now. Open a channel, Vance ordered. The main viewer flickered, and the massive scaled visage of Emperor Salta filled the screen. The Zarathian ruler's golden eyes gleamed with cold amusement, his elongated jaw parting to reveal rows of needle. Like teeth, Captain Vance, he hissed. Your defiance is entertaining, but it ends now. Vance smirked. Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you. Salta's crest flared in irritation. You cannot win. The Empire owns the stars. Your pitiful resistance changes nothing. Behind Vance, the bridge crew exchanged glances. They had all seen the plan. They had all agreed. There were no protests, no last minute pleas, just grim determination. Vance leaned forward. You came here to tax us for breathing, to punish us for existing. But you made one mistake. Salta's nostrils flared. And what is that? You assumed we'd just pay. With that, Vance tapped a command into his console, a single, unassuming key press. The Titan's engines roared to life, not for retreat, but for a full-speed ramming burn straight toward the Imperial flagship. Alarms blared across the bridge, as the ship's AI calculated the impact trajectory. "Collision in 30 seconds, the synthetic voice announced. Salter's hologram flickered, his composure cracking for the first time. "You mad creature, you would die for this." Vance didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Titan plowed forward, its battered frame groaning under the strain. The Zorathian flagship's point, defense guns opened fire, stitching the human dreadnought with plasma bolts. Hull plates tore away. Entire decks vented into the void, but the ship kept coming. 10 seconds, the AI intoned. Salter's hologram wavered, his voice rising to a shriek. "You think this changes anything? The Empire will crush your world." Vance's hand hovered over the final command. "No," he said softly, "you won't." At 5 seconds, he triggered the Titan's core overload. Deep in the ship's heart, the fusion reactors went critical. Safety protocols, long since disabled, did nothing to stop the cascading failure. The containment fields collapsed, and in that last, brilliant moment, the UESN Titan became something else entirely. A bomb. The explosion tore through the Imperial flagship like a supernova. The shockwave rippled outward, igniting the fuel reserves of nearby Zorathian vessels in a chain reaction of fire and destruction. The orbital battlefield became an inferno, a rolling wave of blue-white annihilation that consumed everything in its path. On Earth, the sky lit up as if dawn had come hours early, and in the silence that followed, the remnants of the Galactic Empire's tax fleet drifted, broken and burning, as human defense platforms powered up across the planet. The bill had come due, and humanity had paid it in full. The Senate chamber lay in ruins, its once pristine floating platforms now charred husks drifting in zero gravity. Smoke curled from shattered viewports where Earth's blue glow seeped through like an accusation. Senator Lejo stepped over the twisted remains of a Zorathian sigil, her boots crunching on debris. Around her, the surviving members of the Galactic Council huddled, Vorak delegates with broken mandibles, Superians leaking green ichor from cracked carapaces, a lone Ceralian whose floating orbs dimmed with pain. High Assessor Vex'lix staggered forward, his bureaucratic robes torn, one of his forearms hanging limp. This is insanity," he hissed, vocal cords straining. "You've declared war on the entire Galactic Empire over a tax." Lee didn't blink. She tapped her wristcom, and the chamber's main display flickered to life, showing the wreckage of Emperor Salter's fleet burning in Earth's orbit. The UESN Titan's final act had torn a hole through their armada, fusion backlash igniting fuel lines in a chain reaction that left the Zorathian flagship a molten husk. "No," Lee said softly. "We declared war because you dared to charge us for the right to exist." Ambassador Krell coughed, his Vorak lungs struggling in the thinning air. His four eyes darted to the sealed chamber doors, where human marines in scavenged exosuits stood guard, their rifles humming with overloaded power cells. "You don't understand what you've done," Krell rasped. "The Empire has thousands of fleets, billions of soldiers. You've doomed your species." Outside, the distant thunder of engines shook the chamber. The display switched to a live feed, Earth's remaining defense fleet rising in perfect formation, their burn trails cutting through the smoke of battle, not just warships, freighters, colony vessels. Even retrofitted mining barges armed with jury-rigged plasma cannons. Lee tilted her head. "Funny, that's exactly what Admiral Thalkor said right before Commander Holt turned his flagship into scrap." She reached into her coat and pulled out a data pad. Its screen cracked, but still functional. With deliberate slowness, she dropped it at Vex'lix's feet. The sound echoed in the dead silence. The Zorathian flinched. "What is this? Our final payment?" Li's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Every credit the Empire demanded for our atmospheric consumption, every fine, every late fee." She turned to the other delegates, her voice hardening. "The bill's paid. Now get the hell off our planet." A Gruul delegate, one of the methane-filtering species that had mocked human lungs, let out a panicked warble. "You can't just expel the Galactic Council. This station is neutral territory." Lee didn't answer. Instead, she tapped her wristcom again. The display shifted, showing live feeds from across the Sol system. Mars defense grid powering up, its orbital platforms swiveling toward the fleeing tax ships. Jupiter's shipyards, where half-built dreadnoughts were being armed, not with shields, but with siege engines. And beyond them, blinking red markers, human FTL signatures flaring to life. Krell's mandibles clicked in realization. You're not just defending Earth. No, Lee agreed. She turned toward the viewport where the first human ships vanished into warp. We're delivering receipts. For the first time in Galactic Council history, the chamber was silent. No mocking laughter, no condescending speeches, just the quiet, terrible understanding that humanity had let them think they were weak, that every breath the Empire had taxed had been measured, calculated, weaponized. Outside, the last of Earth's fleet disappeared into the black. The next tax was due on their homeworlds.